poet and writer Kay Spivey, and today I am going to do a wrap-up! I rarely do wrap-ups because I hadn't been reading too much recently. Definitely hadn't been reading my TBR for a long time. They're like all of last year. But I've been on a serious roll recently. I've just been reading like crazy. So it's time to do a wrap-up, especially because most of these books I hauled recently. So let me talk about them because I read some like new favorites recently. I'm so excited. I'm gonna just kind of go maybe in the order that I read them. Let's start there. The main one that I finished, and I'm gonna talk about this as like the first and foremost. This is probably the first thing I finished in May, so we'll start there. I finished Muse of Nightmares. Now I always said I was going to do some kind of wrap up when I finally read Muse of Nightmares because I love Strange the Dreamer so much. So it is time. It's time to talk about this series because I loved it. I loved it so much. I've been reading a lot of fantasy that was kind of samey, like similar things. This was totally different. The closest thing I can think of, and it's not exactly like that, it's actually quite a bit darker, but the closest thing I could compare it to would be Castle in the Sky, which is the sequel to Howl's Moving Castle, but I'd never read anything that was quite like that. This series is so good. So you follow Laszlo Strange. The story starts off where the name of a place was forgotten, but it was forgotten by everyone at the same time, except that Laszlo was saying the name. He was like fighting in the forest, saying the name. And so he's obsessed with figuring out why everyone has forgotten this name of this place, this mythical place where like everything is magical. And so he eventually ends up working in a library and he gets to read all of the books and he's writing his own book. And all of this leads him to finding the people of this place. And he's taught himself their language. He gets to go on an adventure with him. Like all of this is like very much a reader's dream come true, right? Like this is a dreamer's dream. And he gets to this place and everything is sort of more than he could have expected. And this is a dual dual point of view series. You follow Laszlo and he's kind of down with the humans, especially in Strange the Dreamer, and you follow Sari, who is one of the god spawn. They are children of gods who have been eradicated. They've been killed by the humans after years and years of basically enslaving and, major trigger warning for this book, raping the humans. This book really deeply goes into trauma and survival. The series goes deeply into trauma and survival, especially Muse of Nightmares, which really, really hits home about the ways that people are affected by grief and by extreme trauma and how you get past that and deal with it and how sometimes you don't deal with that in a healthy way. And this book just kept surprising me. Like every single thing that happened, I was just like, I could not have foreseen that coming, but it was absolutely the most logical progression of the book. Like everything was so beautiful. All the characters, their actions, you never once were like, why did they do that? You're like, oh yeah, of course that person would do that. Every time. It was so beautifully written. Her way with words, Laini Taylor has just a way of saying things to make it the most beautiful, the most descriptive. Like, I was just blown away by this. I recommended this to a friend and she ended up reading Muse of Nightmares faster than me because she was also as obsessed with just the beauty of the world and the language. I'm telling you, when I got to the end of Muse of Nightmares, I was just like, I'm not ready. Like, I read it so slow because I was not ready for this world to be done. There's so much more I want to know. I want all the gay people to go off and have their own adventure now. Like, that's how I felt at the end. I was like, there's two particular pairings. I just want them to go and have an adventure, the four of them together. It'd be so perfect. Like, Laszlo and Sari can come. But Sarai, is it Sarai? I was saying it Sari in my head. That might be wrong. It might be Sarai, and I just have been saying it wrong the whole time. If you haven't already read it or picked it up from the beautiful covers that are shining like crazy, there we go. If you haven't picked up this series, it's a new favorite series. Like this kind of set the bar for the fantasy that I want to read now. I want it to be this. Okay, let's go into some poetry, and I'm gonna kind of go quickly through a couple of these. One of them is by a viewer. Hi, I read it. I read Scarlet Shadows by, I'm so sorry if I say your first name wrong, Skyla Grant. It's the tiniest little collection. It's so thin, but it's really lovely. It had a very reminiscent of Edgar Allan Poe feel to it, and I read it and I was really impressed. Let's see, where's one that I liked? I put little stars. I don't like writing in my books. I'm just one of those people, I don't like it. I don't actually mind reading books where someone has like annotated. I think it's kind of funny, but I don't like writing it. But in poetry collections, if I really like a poem, I always put a little star. It got really dark after I held that up, didn't it? Yeah, it did. Hopefully all of this doesn't look as bad as it looks on the camera. Here's one that I starred though, and this is called Rice and Tea. And it says, inside the burning cup of tea, a grain of rice begins to sink. I slide a piece of ice beneath a single floaty in the sea, and smile to myself relieved, like someone kind had rescued me. That's incredible. I love that so much. Some of these are a little more edgy, a little bit darker, but I just thought some of these poems were absolutely like stunningly beautiful, so I definitely recommend that. Next up, I was sent a copy of Paper Daisies by Camille Myrick. This was a really nice collection, like just a good solid collection. It sort of talks about her progression of thought as she went from being a single young person living in a city, kind of a lot of liberal friends and influences around her, to living in fairly conservative, very like, you know, you go to church, small town, family values type community, and being a wife there and what that meant, and kind of her progression of mindset of like what it means to be a married woman here, living kind of out, I was gonna say on the edge of society, but it wasn't really that. It's more like learning to homestead and just kind of coming to terms with like who you are and how that reflects like what your situation is now. It was also a lovely collection. I'm just gonna read one from this one too, because they're also kind of short. One of the ones I really liked that I felt an attachment to is called Fourth Wave Femme. I will live by my pen like many courageous women before me. I do not care if it is socially unacceptable. I do not care if you tell me I can't. I will live by my pen, cook supper for my husband, and refuse to have children. Which then I thought was funny because if you follow her YouTube channel, she has a son now. I will write poetry about the world and keep a safe distance from society. I will wipe the kitchen counter with a sponge and make my name known. I will write the way of my life in the face of ridicule. A choice made for me is not a choice at all. So, nice collection. I really liked that one. Next, and I said I was going to read it, and wow. This I need to take a little bit of time about. Tea House of the Almighty by Patricia Smith. Wow. I've talked some on this channel about like what poetry can do, like what it is capable of doing with language. Patricia Smith is the master of it. I had no idea. I must have read something of hers before, but she is the master of it. The way she uses words to paint these descriptive pictures and to just move you into the poem, like you're so emotionally connected to every single poem, and the picture in my head was always so vivid. It was stunning. I was absolutely floored by this. This will give you an idea of her voice, and then I need to talk to you a little bit more about this collection. So this is called Stop the Presses. My job is to draw the pictures no one can voice, to soothe and bellow towards the numbed heart, to breathe in your chronicles, discuss them out in lines weak enough for you to read and swallow. My mouth is a jumble of canine teeth. I bite only at the official whistle. My job is sexy leads for the bones clattering in your closet, to sing you sated each night with a forgettable soundtrack of paper and ink. I am neat, easily folded, a sifter of truth born to be burned. I count your dead, fathom their stories, bless them long, flexible histories and their final names. There are no soft stanzas in this city of curb sleep and murdered children. We need soft words for hard things. This silk brushing the inevitability of rock. Birth truth in this way just once. Craft the news and overcome all that you ever were of reason to turn the page. Just wow. And if you've never like gotten into poetry, if you've always been like poetry is a mystery, like this is it. this to me is what poetry is capable of being, and it was all here in this collection, and I was floored. That all said, I feel like this book needs a really major trigger warning. There's a couple of poems that are a bit heavy, and it does start off that way. It starts off, the very first poem is about being a school teacher and children. It's about working with children who have been too close to death, whose family members have been killed or who have died. It's pretty, I mean, you're starting off the collection, children talking about death. So already, like, there's that. But a lot of the poems are about love or sex, and they're very, like, kind of erotic, and they're also lovely written. However, there are two poems. The first one, I actually got sick after reading it. Like, I felt sick after reading it. It's haunting me. Like, the image of it is haunting me. I had to put down the collection. It's page 39 of this collection. It's called Creatively Loved. And it turns out it's based on a true story. And I have to give a warning because I was loving the collection up to this point, and that poem, I almost couldn't go back to it. I was very much on edge after that poem. It graphically depicts and very emotionally connects you to the very violent death of a child, of a baby. The image is like in my head, and I had to look it up, and it is based on a true story. So if you don't think that's something you can read, you do need to skip that. Because like I said, it's still haunting me. It's very emotional. And I need to stop thinking about it because it's really hard to read. And then I looked it up, and just like, it's amazingly written, and that was kind of the problem for me. It's too well written. It's too well written, and it was horrifying. So, if you don't want to get into that, skip that. The other poem I would recommend you skip is another one that's based on a true story, and just don't look up the true story, and it's called Her Other Name. And this one is depicting the violent rape and disfigurement of a child, and a child who lived through something very violent happening to her. You could just skip those poems. The collection is amazing without them. They very much stand out for how just horrible, and they are based on horrible stories, and she's giving these characters quite a voice, and it is chilling. It just also, I wasn't emotionally ready for it, and I wish I hadn't read them. I wish I hadn't read them. And then of course I had to go look them up, and yeah, they were about real things, and then that was even worse. So, now that we're all emotional about that, just super big trigger warning. If you just skip those poems, it's a stunning collection, but if you don't think you can handle them, like I couldn't, skip them. Really, really, really skip them. Okay, let's get into something a lot happier, and that is maybe my new favorite book. Thank you, Shelley Flowers, for finally pushing me into reading The Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Oh my God. When I say, do you see this book? I read this in one sitting. I had nothing to do for 5 hours. And it did probably take me almost the whole 5 hours. But I couldn't stop. Once I got started, I was on page 10. Yeah. Because it was after first words. So it was like page 10. I started texting all of my friends being like, have you read this? You need to read this. This book is amazing. And then I just couldn't stop. I had to get to the end. Every time like and it's written as poetry. So like, yeah, it is a little bit shorter, but it's an entire collection. It was like 450 pages or something. I think it was like 360 pages. I exaggerated a tiny bit. This is the story of a girl whose name is Shaumara. So it starts with an X. So then you get, the name, the Poet X. She becomes the poet. She likes to write poetry, and she has a very religious mother, and she's kind of going through a crisis of faith. And she talks a lot about the way society views her body, the way the church views her body and not her, and the way kind of her body being, big and voluptuous and beautiful is kind of detrimental to her in many ways, and like gets her in a lot of trouble, and how she has to stand up for herself, and how she's always had to stand up for herself, and just just everything written about in here is so incredible, but also just the way it celebrates poetry, especially in the end. I was just like, I want to be back in high school all of a sudden and have my poetry club back, and all the times when we sat together and we were just writing and having a good time, like, it brought me back to that. And it was just like, even though the character in here isn't me, I wasn't this type of person, I wasn't like, I didn't stand up for myself, I didn't go through a lot of things she did, I didn't have a religious upbringing, no crisis of faith, but the way she loved poetry, just that, it was like, if I had read this younger, I'd have probably sought out more creative spaces, more creative people. This is everything I wanted from a novel, just a growing up person loving poetry. I don't know, I can't even say how much I love it. I just want you to read it so bad. It's so beautiful. And if you don't like the kind of the poetry format for a novel, just know it just works. It's able to do more things somehow than a novel can. It's able to get to you in the way that poetry can, where it really gets you in the emotions. It's able to do that, saying less than a novel would, but then giving you more. I don't know, I was so touched by it. I was so blown away, and I obviously I recommended it to pretty much like everybody. I just was texting a whole bunch of people being like, do you know about this? So I'm glad I know about this now. I absolutely love this. I think this is my new favorite book, because it just hit me so hard, and it just meant so much to me. And I guess it meant a lot to other people too. Like, why was I sleeping on this collection? This was the book I needed to be reading, so I'm so happy I finally picked this up. Now, the next one on the list. I had like a 5-hour drive. I had a 5-hour drive, a 5-hour nothing to do, and then a 5-hour drive back. This is how my last weekend went. So this is why I read a freaking ton of books in the last like week even. These weren't even from I've been reading a lot in the past couple of months. But these were all in like the last week. So I had a 5-hour drive, and I was like, what kind of book could I put on an audiobook? Because I'm not that good with audiobooks. I never really got into audiobooks. Like, what could I have as an audiobook that would kind of last me the whole drive there, the whole drive back, but I don't really have to focus on, like, I could, if I'm not able to really pay attention to the audiobook, it wouldn't be that big a deal, like something kind of light and fun, and that I already own the physical book of. So if I was enjoying it but couldn't pay attention, I could just read it later. And I settled on Carry On by Rainbow Rowell. Oh my freaking god, this is my favorite thing! I just said that about the Poetacks. These are favorites in completely different ways. Now, if you have read Rainbow Rowell's book Fangirl, this is the fan fiction that the character in Fangirl was writing while like dealing with like being in college for the first time, kind of mapping out what it means to be a writer versus a fan fiction writer, what it means to be a college student versus a high school student, like all those things. Great story too, lots of fun. This might be Rainbow Rowell's masterpiece, and when I say, I went in knowing that this was a Drarry fan fiction. And if you don't know what a Drarry fan fiction is, it's Harry Potter and Draco Malfoy together as lovers fan fiction. Because let's be honest, that's what she was writing in Fangirl. It was a knockoff Harry Potter fan fiction. It was Drarry fanfic. We all knew that, but obviously you gotta avoid copyright. So, well, she wrote it. I can't even explain to you how good it was. It was like, I was expecting the Drarry fanfiction. I was like, if they start off with their lips touching, I'm good. Like anything, I'm good. As long as it's cute, totally fine. This was so good. And I'm gonna get serious here. This is what my adult heart needed Harry Potter to be. It was like a deconstruction of Harry Potter. Like all of the things that kind of Harry Potter was a little bit weird about, or like that didn't make sense. This took the baseline of Harry Potter, you know, like the magical wizarding world, the chosen one, all of those base things, and created a totally new story around it. Like a totally new magic system, one that is incredible. You know, like in Harry Potter, like everything is Latin for magic and you gotta use the wand and all of that. This story takes that concept, and all words kind of have power. Words have power in this. And it's phrases. So it's things like get well soon is a healing spell. Like, and it's in all languages. And like the more languages you know, the like stronger your spell casting ability is, just because you're able to access more phrases. Like, it's so brilliant. Like, the way she thought out this magic system alone was incredible. And then it gave me all of the feels. It was so, oh, I'm still obsessed. There's not enough fan art out there. I need more Simon and Baz fan art. I've been looking it up like crazy. Like, who would I have to pay for more Simon and Baz fan art? I just need it. I can't wait to get to Wayward Son. I promised myself I have to drive back out again, like 5 hours, and then 5 hours. I'm waiting to read it, and it's killing me. I want it right now. I want it so bad. It's such a good romance. Like, it's a beautiful romance. So it's a romance. Okay, it's a romance. You already know they're gonna get together. But like the way it's set up, oh, it's like a slow burn, beautiful. Oh, it's so good. Your fangirl heart, like, this is what you needed. But it also has things like there's the Hermione character in this. She is perfect in this. Perfect. Penny is my fave. She was incredible. It also, it kind of, if you think about, there's a little bit of like Mortal Instruments things going on in here too, I would say. Okay, let me back up, because I'm not totally sure if you would feel the same way about this if you had no Harry Potter background. And I'll say that it hits the same way, it hits like fan fiction in the way that having the backdrop of Harry Potter informs a lot of the things in this. And it's all really well world built. Everything is really well explained. So you could read it having not read Harry Potter, but there are a lot of things that like having that baseline makes a lot more sense. Having the baseline of like what the first 7 years of a magical chosen one at a wizarding school would look like informs what this book then is. Like, it informs where we are now. And there are certain characters, like having the Hermione best friend, knowing that Hermione is kind of the base character, kind of informs, you know, a little bit more about her already. Or like there's another character, and I won't say who they are, but they are very much a combination of a specific Harry Potter character and a specific Mortal Instruments character that is so tightly woven that when they showed up, I was like, I know what's going on with this character. And that's to not spoil you, but if you know, when you saw them and you knew what their role was in that and what the description was, you were like, ah, I see what's happening here. I got you. I know all about this character. It's a character who comes up a lot, and if you're on the same wavelength as me, then you probably also knew the big twist pretty early on. But I'm just saying, like, there's things like that. But then with all the payoff of a wonderful romance where the boys get together in the end. Like, so good. Such good representation too. Like, she obviously put a lot of work and heart and love into this. And it's so much better than Fangirl. I loved Fangirl. Fangirl was great, but this is better. This is what she needed to be doing with her whole life. I mean, this is perfect. This is what Rainbow Rowell needs to be remembered for. And even if Wayward Son is bad, this was excellent. This was fun. It was exactly what I needed. Like I said, my fangirl heart just exploded. It was so good. Is that enough gushing about it? I don't know. Is it? Maybe. Let's go on a downer. I also read V for Vendetta. And I will say, for an Alan Moore book, The Watchmen is a better novel. It just is. It's just better written. It's better. I liked the art better. This is the darkest comic. Like, straight up the black space on every damn page. It's so dark. The whole thing. So, like, picture-wise, like, the style is alright, but, like, I don't know, maybe this wasn't the right time to be reading it. Like, I was thinking, like, Revolution, V for Vendetta, I didn't need this, maybe. And so what this actually is, the movie takes very, very select slices from this and doesn't tell the whole story, because what this is basically a guide to anarchy. It's explaining to you what anarchy is, what the anarchists want, kind of giving you a hero to root for among those things. And V is so different from the movie. And I think that's probably where Alan Moore was most disappointed with the movie, is that in the movie, V is a character. And in this, it's very important for V to be an idea. And that's really, like, that's the main part of the story, especially at the end. That is the main lesson, is that V is just an idea. And you need to come away with that. And you don't get that in the movie at all. He was very much a person. And yeah, the movie just lost that completely. So I see why he was disappointed. I don't think it was as well told. There were many parts that were kind of boring, but it's very dark. It's very dystopian. There isn't a lot of hopefulness except for if you're like, yeah, anarchy. And at the same time, it's like, it's not a perfect solution. And it talks a lot about how, like, people aren't perfect. And it was like, I'm not going to say I liked it, because I don't think I liked it. But it wasn't his best work. But it was interesting, and I think I did need to read it. And I think it was a good thing to read at this time when there's a lot of things happening and changing. There's a revolution going on. And the importance of carrying through the people's voices was something I took away from this. That the people are so important, and our voices being heard is so important. And that the government shouldn't be the one dictating everything to us. Like, the people should be able to speak and live and thrive. And that was kind of, I think, what he was hoping he'd come away with. All the dude bros who are like, oh, it's such a, like, V is so cool and wearing the mask, were like, I don't know if y'all read the comic. I don't know. Or maybe you did and you took away what he wanted, and that's, you went for anarchy. And, like, I mean, Alan Moore is an anarchist, so if he wrote an anarchy guide, I guess we can't be surprised, right? Yeah, like, obviously he wrote a guide to anarchy. I would say just craft level wise, and also I preferred the art in The Watchmen. That's just me. Last book that I read in the last few months. This might seem like a short stack for many people, but, like, this is a lot of books for me to have read in a very short period of time, and I'm very impressed with myself, and I'm already holding it up. This was so good. The Forgotten Girl by India Hill Brown, who is also Books and Big Hair on YouTube. And she finally started posting again. And when I made my video, the booktubers and author tubers and poetry tubers that you should be following, while I was editing that to, like, find the picture and everything to put up when I talked about her, I found out that the book was already out. That's when I found out. I thought it was coming out this year for some reason, but it had already come out, so I went ahead and bought it, obviously, because I'd kind of been excited about it, and then this book came out around a time that was really bad for me, so obviously I forgot about it. But I got it now. Okay, I had to change the memory card. I'm back. Okay, so basically The Forgotten Girl, it was just so good. So first of all, it's a middle grade thriller, which I didn't know that was a category. But it's kind of scary, actually. It's pretty scary. I read half of it last night, and then it was getting dark, and I had to stop because I'm a wuss. I don't read a lot of horror. I don't read a ton of, I read some thrillers, but I don't read a lot of horror. And this was pretty scary for me. So, I mean, R.L. Stine has a blurb on the back, so that'll kind of give you a baseline for, like, the level of scary, I suppose. But also, this book, it goes into segregation and talks about it in just a really kind of organic way. So this is about two friends who find an abandoned graveyard, and they decide to do a school project on abandoned grave sites in their hometown. And it really goes into kind of their learning about the segregation that happened in their town and the segregated grave sites. And also, they're getting haunted by the spirit of a girl whose grave they find. And yeah, it's pretty scary, but it is so brilliant. And I think, especially right now, a lot of people are talking about, like, don't just read nonfiction, don't just read books by Black authors, like, right now. But this is the kind of book where, like, it introduces kind of a heavy subject of, like, racism and segregation, especially in the South. I believe this is in North Carolina, and it talks about it in a way that's just really organic to the story, really organic to the characters, and kind of incidental to the plot. So you're sort of learning at the same time you're getting into this really chilling, really interesting ghost story and this investigation, and it's just such a lovely book. I think I have an aunt who teaches 5th grade, and these are 12-year-olds, so I don't know if this might be like an age level above her kids. I'm not totally sure how old you are in 5th grade, but I'm going to mention it to her as a book that I thought was really good in case any of her kids are kind of reading a little bit above and would be interested in a cool thriller like this that's really like educational without that being the point. I feel like this is the kind of book that we need to be seeing more, especially more accessible for elementary and middle school kids. Like this type of story where it's scary, it's spooky, it's like Goosebumps, but it's also really educational and probably would teach kids something they had never learned before and that they aren't learning in school. So really good. Also go check out her channel. Actually, she read the first chapter, so then you can find out if you actually like the collection or not, if it sounds like something you'd be interested in. Keeping in mind, the first chapter doesn't have the scary parts in it. I'll link that video below so you can listen to her read it in her own voice, and then you can check out her channel. So there we have it. Now I have to do the hold them up part, right? I'm not going to be able to get these all in here without dropping it, but we're going to try. I'm going to put Strange the Dreamer in here, even though I didn't actually read it, because it was part of the wrap-up, because I didn't wrap it up before. Hoist! This is my wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you found something you might be interested in reading, possibly. So many favorites in this. Like, honestly, I think Muse of Nightmares, The Poet X, and Carry On, like, changed my life for novels. And then also The Forgotten Girl. I was so good. Like, I just read so many really good books, and I feel like I'm on a roll and I want to read more really good books. I don't know if I had boxed myself in and like I need to be reading this kind of thing, or like this is the books I have. I don't know, but I bought a lot of really good stuff recently and I'm reading a lot of really good stuff, and I just feel like so inspired. I cannot wait to start Wayward Son. I still have a massive pile of books. There's half a pile of books down here underneath me on the floor, and half a pile of books in the other room that are just like the TBR that I want to be reading right now. So we'll see what I get into next. But that'll be all from me for today. I think I rambled and ranted long enough. I hope you are staying aware and reading some new things, some diverse things if possible, especially this month. Thank you so much for watching. Continue to stay aware, keep up to date on everything that's going on in the world, because it is so important to be informed and to be continuing to educate yourself and to learn new things. And yeah, that'll be all from me today. Good luck to all of us, especially to you. Bye.